On this Sunday night, the fury in Atlanta. A night of anger after a black man is killed by police.
I think you've had too much to drink to be.
What the body cam footage reveals about the confrontation. The twister in Alberta.
This is beyond my imagination.
The damage done by the spring storm. The bar brawl in Montreal, why some establishments are defying orders and opening up. And the murderer who found redemption in math.
Global National with Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin in Atlanta, where the death of another black American involving police has ignited fury once again. Over 100 protesters marched last night outside the fast food restaurant where Rayshard Brooks was fatally shot on Friday. Demonstrators set fire to the restaurant and shut down a major highway. Dozens were arrested. One officer has been fired, the police chief has stepped down, and the victim's family is calling for justice. As Jennifer Johnson reports, police have now released body cam footage of the confrontation. And a warning, this story contains disturbing content.
Atlanta, the site of new violent protests. A Wendy's set on fire after a police officer shot and killed a black man in the restaurant's parking lot. 27-year-old Rayshard Brooks was found sleeping in his car in the Wendy's drive-thru and then failed a sobriety test.
I think you've had too much to drink to be driving. So put your hands behind your back for me.
The officer's body camera shows Brooks resisting arrest. A struggle ensues, and the police cruiser dash cam shows Brooks grabbing the officer's taser. The audio is still recording on the ground.
Stop! Stop fight! Stop fight!
With the taser, the video shows Brooks starts to run. Then you hear gunshots. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation has reviewed the officer's video.
He runs a relatively short distance and at that point turns around and it appears to the eye that he points the taser at the Atlanta officer. At that point, the Atlanta officer reaches down and retrieves his weapon from his holster and discharges it.
Officer Garrett Rolfe has been fired. Officer Devin Brosnan placed on administrative duty. And in less than 24 hours, Police Chief Erica Shields resigned. Brooks' family lawyer says officers should have handled this differently.
Hey, buddy, you fell asleep in line. You okay? Why don't you pull your car over there and call an Uber? And then you walk over and you leave. Why is that so hard for police officers?
The incident comes as emotions in Atlanta are running high after Ahmaud Arbery was shot to death while jogging in February, and the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis during a police arrest last month. Atlanta's mayor has already convened a committee to examine the use of force by police.
I firmly believe that there is a clear distinction between what you can do and what you should do. I do not believe that this was a justified use of deadly force.
Recommendations from the task force are expected within 45 days, but Atlantans say they will continue to protest until black men don't have to fear for their lives when stopped by police. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
A First Nations chief in New Brunswick is asking RCMP to stay away while his community grieves one of their own. Rodney Levi was killed during a confrontation with officers Friday night. Police say he was shot dead after he lunged at them with knives. Leaders in the community say Levi was troubled, but not a violent person.
There was already a distrust there for the RCMP, unfortunately, and this has only solidified that. I'm scared for the individuals here that suffer from mental illnesses as well and addictions, and they hear what happened to a community member, a person they grew up with.
Levi's death is the second police-related shooting of an Indigenous person in New Brunswick this month. 26-year-old Chantel Moore died after being shot by an officer who was checking her well-being in Edmundston. The officer says Moore threatened him with a knife. A massive cleanup is underway in southern Alberta after a powerful storm rolled through the province. Thousands of homes and vehicles have been damaged, and there's a chance another weather system could hit the region as early as tonight. Christa Dao reports.
In mere minutes, Calgary was pummeled with extreme weather Saturday evening, a June thunderstorm resembling winter time, producing hail the size of tennis balls. The hailstones hit at a speed of up to 100 kilometers per hour. ripping the siding off homes and easily smashing out vehicle windows.
I would say this is beyond my imagination. Those people who are stuck in the water in the cars, it takes a while for them to come out. It was kind of scary.
Many Calgary streets instantly turning into lakes. Oh my God. This major Calgary roadway flooded. Semi-trucks and vehicles at a standstill, submerged in water. The fire department called in to save stranded drivers. Drivers knee-deep in water, their vehicles unsalvageable. And near Lethbridge, Environment Canada confirmed a tornado was spotted near New Dayton. At least 6 other funnel clouds were also reported in that area. And by Sunday, first responders were working in overtime, pumping out water from many Calgary streets. Homeowners shoveling hail and fixing roofs.
I'm here in Canada also 20 years, and I never saw that kind of stuff.
Another reminder, Alberta's extreme storm season is upon us. Christa Dao, Global News, Calgary.
Canadian soldiers will be heading back to Ukraine as the military looks to restart some overseas missions. 90 Canadian Armed Forces personnel will head back to a military base in Ukraine where our troops have been training Ukraine's forces since 2015. That mission was temporarily suspended in April because of the pandemic. The soldiers are expected to arrive in the coming days and spend 14 days in isolation before training starts back up next month. In Ontario, people were able to do something today they haven't done in 3 months. Go to church. The province allowed places of worship to open their doors on Friday with safety measures in place. But as Jeff Semple explains, not everyone is eager to return.
For many churchgoers, this was an answer to prayer. For the first time in 3 months, Sunday services in Ontario were open to in-person parishioners.
We are so happy to be back.
Ontario's premier gave his blessing last week for places of worship to reopen. Crowds returned for Friday prayers at the mosque, Shabbat at the synagogue, and Sunday Mass at church.
Given all the stresses, all the challenges people are facing medically, psychologically, spiritually, I think now more than ever, people need the opportunity to come back to church.
On reopening holy places, provinces have taken different approaches. In Quebec, churches remain closed, while in BC and Alberta, gatherings must be limited to 50 people. Ontario's restrictions are more lenient. Attendance numbers must be capped at 30% capacity. This Toronto church seats 3,000, which means they're welcoming up to 850 people.
Every other row is blocked off. And if you sit down, you have to be 3 seats away, which is over 2 meters.
But for some, that's still too close for comfort.
It's simply, I believe, too early to open churches.
This Anglican church deacon says his and many other mainstream Christian denominations are keeping their churches closed until the fall, while streaming their services online.
If we really care about individual believers and worshippers and God's plan, that we should actually be healthy, I don't quite understand this urge, this rush to go back now when we still know so little and the potential harm is so great.
In the early days of the pandemic, large services were super spreaders. Churches in France and South Korea sparked outbreaks linked to thousands of cases. More than 50 members of this Washington state choir became infected during a rehearsal, even though they were avoiding physical contact.
Singing, chanting, those are the kinds of activities that from an infected person would actually expel quite a bit of virus.
For that reason, some are taking extra precautions. This synagogue has more than 1,000 members, but is capping attendance at just 20.
If we can find ways to preserve community, for me that meant particularly reaching out to people in need.
For whom this can be a lifeline. Jeff Semple, Global News, Toronto.
Tomorrow, Quebecers outside the Montreal region will be able to enjoy eating out at restaurants, but bars aren't allowed to open. Still, some owners are determined to open their doors. As Mike Armstrong explains, they're willing to defy orders and start pouring drinks.
His bar has been closed for 3 months and counting, but Steve Ciozios says this weekend hurts. It should have been the busiest of the year. This was supposed to be Grand Prix weekend.
The streets would be closed here, Maisonneuve and Crescent. The stage would be there. Would have been beautiful, beautiful.
Now, most bars and restaurant owners in Quebec are preparing to reopen over the next 2 weeks, but Siozios isn't allowed. According to the government's reopening plan, only bars with food preparation permits are supposed to reopen. If you don't have a kitchen, you're supposed to stay closed.
You can have a beer, or you can have a beer with chicken wings. Okay, it's still a bar.
The government is in fact loosening the rules for some. Restaurants usually aren't allowed to sell alcohol unless the patron's also buying food. That rule's being dropped for now. Siozio says that means restaurants are acting like bars, while he doesn't even have a date for when he'll be able to reopen. So he says he's going to defy the government and reopen July 1st.
Listen, I followed what the government says for 3 months. I've been a good citizen, a good corporate citizen. But at some point, I need to think of my business.
It's pretty high up.
Just a few doors down is Ziggy's Pub, and Ziggy Eichenbaum spent Sunday preparing to reopen. He says he's run out of time, and even though he doesn't have a kitchen, he's going to open his doors.
July 1st, I'm opening up.
Even if you're not allowed?
Even if I'm not allowed. I have no choice. My hands are tied.
Eichenbaum says this year's a bust. He knows he's not going to make money. He just wants to get his staff back to work and stop the bleeding.
I'm not asking for anything else. I'm just asking to stay alive.
You're going to have nobody left.
Bar owners could face fines if they reopen. Siozio says he's already spoken to a lawyer who says he's eager to fight any fines and confident a judge would see the rules aren't fair. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Coming up, why Denmark and Norway are isolating Sweden. A frantic rescue operation is underway in southeastern China tonight after a truck carrying liquefied natural gas exploded on a busy highway south of Shanghai. The force of the explosion shattered windows in nearby apartments and crushed workshops below. 19 people are dead and nearly 200 people are injured, but there are fears many victims are still buried under the rubble. Tomorrow, several countries in Northern Europe will reopen their borders to one another. But Sweden is excluded from the plan for imposing much lighter lockdown measures. As Eric Sorensen explains, the country has found itself isolated for what many countries have labeled a politically fueled decision.
Through it all, Sweden has looked more normal than almost any country during the pandemic. With distancing guidelines and top-notch health care, the Swedes defied convention by keeping open schools for young children and businesses like restaurants during the first wave of COVID-19. Many Swedes are satisfied with the results.
I'm not walking around thinking that, we have a real disaster here in Sweden.
I think this will pass, and I'm proud that we're not getting angry and we're acting in a very dramatic way about it.
Much of the credit was given to Sweden's chief epidemiologist, Anders Tegnell, for a policy that avoided a complete lockdown.
It's working, and the Swedish healthcare is delivering results.
But it turns out the Swedes have been relatively hard hit. Sweden has had close to 5,000 deaths from COVID-19, the largest number in Scandinavia. For its population, that's 47 deaths per 100,000 in Sweden. Neighboring Denmark has had only 10 deaths per 100,000, and Norway just over 4 deaths per capita. In Sweden, many lives were lost in long-term care facilities. Acknowledging there's room for improvement, Anders Tegnell recently told Swedish radio if faced with the same disease again, his country would do something in between what Sweden did and what the rest of the world has done. It's a disappointment for anyone who'd hoped the Swedish model would succeed with a softer quarantine.
Well, they had enormous outbreaks amongst their elderly, resulting in a very high death rate amongst the elderly. But data suggests that the Swedish economy is suffering as well. So in that respect, they failed.
In the meantime, Denmark and Norway plan to open their borders on Monday to each other and to Germany and Iceland, but not to Sweden. Yet. Denmark is in a different place from Sweden, said the Danish Prime Minister, when it comes to the coronavirus. Sweden calls it a political decision. It feels closing the border won't make it safer.
Our communicable expert says that is not a good thing for hindering the spreading of the virus. So that is then a political decision, and we don't want to take that political decision because we are going to live together also afterwards.
Sweden defends the balance it has struck, saying this is a marathon, not a sprint.
It's been right. The policy's been perfectly okay, but it's very sad that a lot of people are dying at the elderly care homes. But
he shakes his head because in the end there seems to be no easy way out of the pandemic. For Sweden and every country, the search continues for a way to normalize life and the economy without costing lives. Eric Sorensen, Global News.
Still ahead, how Trump and religious groups are taking aim at same-sex adoption. The battle between religious freedoms and equal rights is heating up in the United States. In 2018, Philadelphia ended a contract with a state-funded religious adoption agency that barred requests from same-sex couples. The city said it was discrimination, but the agency argues it would violate its beliefs. As Reggie Cicchini explains, the Trump administration is now weighing in on the case.
For thousands of people in the United States, adopting or fostering a child is a way to expand a family.
Here we go.
But same-sex couples face obstacles not experienced by straight couples.
And what we've seen in recent years is an effort to try to use the freedom of religion to push back on those anti-discrimination provisions.
In Philadelphia, a taxpayer-funded religious adoption agency lost its contract when it barred LGBTQ2 couples from adopting, saying it violated their rights to freedom of religious beliefs, setting the stage for a constitutional battle.
People should be able to have whatever religious beliefs they want and follow them in their home, but not in their business world.
A 2018 study shows 21% of gay couples are raising adopted kids, compared with just 3% of straight couples, even as 11 states allow for discrimination based on religion.
And any qualified family that gets through the rigors of background checks and trainings and setting up their home to be a loving, welcoming home, they are qualified. They are wonderful.
The case has now been given a boost by the Trump administration as it plays to its conservative religious base, with the Department of Justice arguing the United States has a substantial interest in the preservation of the free exercise of religion.
They are weighing in on people who do not fit the same religious profile that they consider the correct one.
Religious freedom is a familiar fight in the U.S. In 2018, the High Court sided with a Denver area baker who refused services to a gay couple. The courts claimed his religion was shown hostility, something that could happen again with the Supreme Court tilted further to the right, leaving the American Civil Liberties Union to fear a ruling over the issue of adoption could have profound consequences for the more than 400,000 children in foster care across the country.
There are just not enough families for them, period. Full stop.
The court is expected to hear this case in October, but it's unclear when a ruling will be made. For same-sex couples considering adoption, the fear is that a defense of religious liberties will come at the expense of their desire to grow or start their family. Reggie Cicchini, Global News, Washington.
Up next, the convict turned academic, how math is helping one man find a second chance. It's a premise straight out of a movie. Christopher Havens is receiving academic praise for helping important research. Havens taught himself math in prison. The convict is serving a 25-year sentence for murder. And as Amanda Jelowicki reports, he says he's using knowledge to find redemption and not just for himself.
Congratulations, John. It's the achievement of a lifetime.
The film A Beautiful Mind tells the story of John Nash, a brilliant American mathematician who suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. Many accomplished mathematicians worked through calamities. Alan Turing helped solve the Enigma code, but was condemned for homosexuality.
However difficult life may seem, there is always something you can do.
And Stephen Hawking worked through excruciating physical disabilities. And Hollywood has given us the story of Good Will Hunting, the young man with anger issues working as a janitor at MIT, solving complex math problems in his spare time.
Looks right.
Well, there's a story playing out inside a Washington state prison that seems equally improbable. This is Christopher Havens. He's a high school dropout and former drug addict serving 25 years for murder in the shooting death of a Washington man over a drug dispute. Now he's proving to be a brilliant self-taught mathematician.
It helped me to grow into this new individual. That's why I love mathematics. I feel like it has offered me another chance at life.
Haven's story starts in solitary confinement 7 years ago.
The bed's a cold concrete slab and the large fluorescent light directly above your head, it doesn't shut off. Most people don't handle it too well. Some people snap. Myself, I played Sudoku.
Sudoku inspired him to start learning math on his own. Eventually, he contacted a math journal searching for a mentor. He was put in touch with 2 professors from the University of Turin. Their daughter teaches at McGill University.
The really surprising thing was to realize that he was not one of these cranks, but he actually was really gifted for math and that he was completely self-taught.
Suruti's father eventually welcomed Havens onto his research team. The team recently had their work published in a prestigious math journal.
Second chances are so important because you never know what will be thrown away without these second chances.
I think it's a story of transformation, right? So we can learn that people can really transform their lives. We cannot ever say this is a bad guy.
Havens helped establish a prison math program helping other inmates. He considers it his path to redemption.
So everything I do is dedicated to the victim of my crime and his family. I never expect my debt to be repaid, but it's at least a start.
A start to what he hopes is a better life for himself and for others. Amanda Jelowicki, Global News, Montreal.
And that is Global National for this Sunday. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight, we leave you with a special drive-by birthday celebration for Canada's youngest centenarian. Yegia Sambulian turned 100 today. 70 cars honked their horns in his honor as he sat smiling and waving outside Toronto's Armenian Evangelical Church, where many say he hasn't missed a Sunday service since arriving in Canada from Lebanon 40 years ago. Thank you for watching. Donna Friesland is back tomorrow. Good night.